Okay, so oftentimes with logo design, with type design, I personally will work it up in Photoshop with like hand drawing, with using raster drawing to clean it up first, as I did with this mock-up, in order to get the client's approval on it. In this case, the president's office for the college, right, that we're doing this coloring book for. And so instead of trying to recreate it from existing typefaces, I can simply bring it into Illustrator and live trace it. But sometimes that causes difficulty as well. So you want to always know, once it's a vector, how to be able to work with it, correct it, modify it as a vector. Whether you have a tablet or not, the important thing is that your type is a vector tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out the Nico here, because I've already cleaned up my spot illustration of Nico flying. And so I'm going to use the lasso tool just to select all of those. Then I'm going to say edit cut. That copies it onto the clipboard of the computer, the running memory of the computer. I make a new layer, I select that layer, and I say edit paste in place. So you see now he has different color anchor points, and I can turn him on and off, and I can lock him. So I'm going to turn him off and lock him. And now I'm just going to work on this vector. First, I want to look at the cloud shapes that are drawn behind. And they're nice and smooth. I don't see any bumps I need to correct. I think if I'm really picky, I can smooth out the top of this, and I just do that with the small selection tool. Once I see the anchors, I can then use the pencil tool to round it and soften it. Once I've used the small selection tool, I can use Command to shortcut to it. For some of these other accents that I want to modify. And once you see the anchor points with the small selection tool, you can move to the large selection tool just to rotate them, to enlarge them, and to give them more prominence. Small selection tool to get the individual anchor points. And then I can also use that tool to move the individual anchor points as long as I hover over them first. Like so. So I'm going to work from the outside in. I could also use the small selection tool and then just use the smooth tool. Instead of having to redraw, I can just kind of force it to soften. Because that's what I'm after. If it looks a little too sharp. Sometimes that's all it takes. Same thing here. Nice thing about the soften tool is you don't need to stay on the path. It's just going to modify what's existing. It's going to average out the anchor points. All that looks good. I love clean vectors. Everything's nice and smooth. Now this is type design. It's not the same as logo design. Doesn't need to be perfect. Clients are likely not going to notice hard edges and soft edges to the same extent that you will. But as a digital artist, especially if you're working on brand identity, these things can matter a whole lot. So we're going to soften some of these edges, make that more readable using that pencil tool. And you often have to do a lot of zooming in and out so you know what you're modifying. Often live trace wants to straighten things that you want curved. So I want to still imply that same curve. So I need to correct that, build that back in. And if I don't do it in the smoothest way, even though I have the smooth setting on the pencil, I can always use the smooth tool to average it out. So vectors are never easy, whether you're modifying from an existing typeface or whether you're live tracing and correcting. What matters is being able to control all of these factors, knowing how to use the tool effectively. Just like any creative discipline, you gain confidence and it gets easier with practice. You can see that I like to use the pencil tool and the smooth tool a lot at this stage, which is why I like that Essentials Classic workflow, which puts them together underneath the brush instead of combined with the brush, which is the new 2021 Illustrator default. So you got to find what works for you in your workflow. And if I'm finding I have to use the pencil and smooth a lot, I might just change my pencil settings by double-clicking to be even more smooth. Maybe that will do some of it for me. So when I redraw, it will automatically average out the anchor points. Now this is all modifying the type, and I like that. It's making it more original. It's making it your own. Paying attention to spacing and readability. Where you want hard edges, where you want curves, how you want it to flow. And that certainly has applications in packaging, in key art, in all of these areas that are so abundant in our visual culture, where you have imagery and text grouped together, like a Netflix menu as you're searching for something to watch. So being able to control these factors, work with them, powerful communications tool. And again, I'm doing this all with the mouse, but a tablet can be very helpful too. So it's a little bit more like a smooth workflow. What to do with this big space? I want to just soften it a little. I don't want it to call too much attention to itself. There, that looks better. Okay, now we look at the big letter forms. I'm going to do a little bit of rounding, a little bit of softening, nipping and tucking, clean these up, make them my own. This is called a tangency in design. You want to avoid it when things are touching uncomfortably. So you have to make a decision. Do you want them to overlap or do you want there to be clear space between them? Here we have the touching, but it feels more intentional. To the kerning, to the spacing. And remember, for cleanliness of design and clarity, fewer anchor points is better. So if you keep working an area and you just end up with lots and lots of anchor points, go ahead and use that smooth tool. Try to simplify it. You want to do more with less. The fewer factors you have, the fewer you have to adjust, to correct it. So sometimes when you live trace, issues like this will happen, where it creates it all out of one path, but it really should be multiple paths. That's where the blob brush can come in. And you simply paint over it, that will connect it, and then you can redraw the edges and refine, just like it was set up the way you wanted it originally. Smooth that out. Going for the look of dynamic clouds, so I don't mind a little bit of bumpiness. Often the way I will refine existing typefaces is to round them out and make them look a little more hand done. And if you just fall in love with this power to make everything clean and smooth, like you're cutting it out of paper, then type design, logo design, the branding aspects and identity design aspects of graphic design as a discipline are where your interests and skills are most needed in industry. But if you find that this is really, really tedious, then you want to focus more on the illustration and graphics side and not so much on the design and layout side for your career ambitions, for the skills that you advertise for use. Now, all projects, all jobs will have aspects to it you don't enjoy. But the reason it's really important to know what goes into this is if you're an illustrator that does the spot illustrations, you have to be aware of what the design end of it involves so that you can give input, so that you can make your work more compatible with the type design part of it. Let's say you're doing a book cover or an album cover or a poster, or you're doing key art. So even if it's not your preference and someone else is hired to do that, often designers work with illustrators. Understanding how things are done and how it can be fixed will make you much more effective. And make people want to work with you over and over again, so that work doesn't have to be redone because of miscommunications. And as an illustrator, you wouldn't then ask the designer to do anything that's not possible. You would know what's possible because you've understood the process for yourself. So this O is a bit of a mess with all of its pointed edges, but quickly fixed with the pencil tool. Remember, these are all fill paths. These are not done with strokes, so we can always adjust the inside or the outside of the line. That will make a big difference to how clean it feels. Just using the smooth tool here. Sometimes the smooth tool will not take away a sharp corner, so you have to use the pencil tool. But other times it can really be nice averaging out